gentle marketers. Welcome back to episode 85 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, a show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. As usual, I'm Sarah Croce. I'm the host of this show, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a better way to market your business. Or you might also be someone that I call a marketing impact pioneer. So right now you're still working in an organization and you're also there, maybe in the marketing department, looking for better ways to connect with your audience. Before we begin, a quick business announcement. Our next Gentle Business Circle call, our monthly explorations of gentle marketing, is coming up on April 21st. We are a small bunch, about 20 plus gentle marketers who get together once per month to help each other on this journey towards a more gentle approach to marketing and business. So if your intuition is telling you, is kind of nudging you, then maybe this is the time to join. Members of the circle come from a broad background of business types, sizes, and growth stages. We have business coaches and consultants, branding specialists, virtual assistants, life and health coaches, financial consultants, and many more professionals. There is no discrimination depending on revenue in the circle, so no need to be in the 6 or 7 figure club. And if that's where you're at, great, we'd love to have you, but know that in the circle we don't typically measure success only by the number of zeros in our revenue. Besides very pragmatic business information, we also hold space for the human connection, the doing and the being. So we create something new and different, a modern leadership model that's focused on the inclusion of everyone's unique life and business experience. If this sounds like it's for you, you can find out all the details at sarahsanacroce.com/circle and choose the monthly price that feels good to you and suits your current budget. All right, so today's episode falls under the P of product, and I'm talking to my friend Mike Mooney. It would be easy to say that Mike Mooney's career has been going in circles for the last 25 years in the high-speed world of professional motorsports. Mike built a reputation for creating award-winning campaigns that drove success for many highly regarded brands, such as Mercedes, Walmart, Eli Lilly, and many more. Having worked with championship-level drivers and teams for decades, Mike learned and embraced the fact that our mindsets define us. With a passion for personal empowerment, continuous improvement, and results, Mike left racing to share the lessons and experiences from a high-pressure, high-visibility, and high-performing career. Mike speaks, coaches, and consults with people who recognize that shifting is the new norm. He guides his audiences to proactively identify where, when, and how to shift in order to stay competitive, and whether that's their reputation, mindset, personal branding, leadership, or life and career pivots. His breakthrough book, Reputation Shift, Lessons from Pit Road to Boardroom, is a roadmap with ready-to-use personal branding and reputation-building strategies for people who want to create greater personal and professional opportunities in their lives. We begin slow, but speed up fast and end up in pretty deep territory. For example, Mike shares his own awakening story after 25 years in a hustle and speed-oriented industry. What mindset has to do with changing from speed to slowness, how us entrepreneurs can build sustainable personal brands, Mike's take on the know, like, and trust factor, and how much modern brands talk to people's feelings, and so much more. So without further ado, let's talk to Mike Mooney. Hey, Mike, so good to see you.
Sarah, hello, my friend. It's been like forever. It feels like anyway. It's great to see you this morning or this afternoon for you, right?
Yeah, we always have that time zone difference. But yeah, I told my audience in the intro that we're part of the same mastermind. So we're mastermind buddies.
Well, I was going to say, that phrase of being a mastermind always cracks me up. I don't put myself in that category, but just being around amazing people, like-minded
That's
people
right.
that really challenge you is phenomenal. I think we all need that.
Yeah. Yeah. We call it the elevation group, something with elevation.
Collective, right?
Yeah.
Elevation
Collective. Yes.
collective.
Yeah. There you
Yes.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great group. Mike, we have a great topic, I think, for our listeners and viewers today, and that is all about slow branding.
Mm.
So I'd love
Yes.
to,
Yes.
unpack this with you. But first of all, you actually didn't start out with the slow approach. So why don't you tell people about your speedy kind of story and how you then transition from speed to slowness? But let's start with your story and how that all unfolded.
Absolutely. It's so funny, Sarah, when you reached out and we were talking about the topic of slow, I chuckle because my whole life, my career has been about going fast, and it's been all about speed. And this idea of slowing down was somewhat foreign, but at the same time, it does relate. So I've spent a 25-year career in professional motorsports, where I was handling brand strategy work for brands like Mercedes-Benz, Walmart, Tylenol, Eli Lilly, Sprint, Nextel. So some really, interesting and unique brands and recognizable brands out there. But I was doing that in the worlds of Formula One, IndyCar, NASCAR, where I was helping these brands figure out how did they use a sponsorship in this, high performance, high speed world to have their brand come to life in a way that was going to be authentic and credible and relevant, that was going to help them really be able to return, return on that $25 million, $30 million investment that they were making. So my whole world was really around, okay, so how do we leverage speed, the power of speed for brands to come to life and then ultimately be able to connect with their target audience or the race fans in a way that would help their business?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think when we first met, you were really your vocabulary was full of words that had to do with the racing world and speed and I can't remember, transition and shifting, like all these words. I'm like, he's always talking about cars somehow.
But here's the interesting part, and as I've made my pivot, Sarah, is recognizing, and I think as entrepreneurs, we have to recognize that, we're all vehicles. We're all vehicles. We're just delivering different things through this vehicle. It happens to be our personal, a presence, the words we use, our brands, so we're vehicles. So to me, it's always, been natural to talk about words like accelerating, shifting, speed. But what was interesting, and we didn't talk about this, but as I was thinking about the conversation we're going to have, is that there's actually, a saying in racing as it comes to drivers, where we say sometimes you have to slow down in order to speed up. Right. And that concept seems, again, sort of like very like an oxymoron in a way of, but the reality is this, is that there are often times when a driver wants to get around the track as quickly as they can, that they drive into the corner too fast. They don't use the brakes when they need to. And there are actually marks on the racetrack, like little lines on the track, where the driver's told, hit your marks, slow down to hit your marks. And in that course of slowing down to make sure that they're hitting their mark, they're actually gaining speed overall over the track. So the conversation we're going to have actually isn't too far from this idea of racing, but as entrepreneurs, the way sometimes we have to slow down, whether it be working on our business or the brand or the market, whatever it may be, but slow down in order to speed up.
Yeah, I love that. And that's really what it felt like to me, this 2020, that was all about slowing down. And I used the year, as you know, to write the Gentle Marketing Revolution book. But yeah, it was just a perfect opportunity because everything around us was slowing down. And at the same time, my business was really also in this transition. And it felt like I needed to experience this really just like slothness, kind of like really like walking in mud, like, okay, this is really, really slow, like too slow.
Yeah.
In order to be able to say, okay, I've lived through that. Now I can, build up from here again. The other thing that came to mind as you were talking is when you said, we're all a vehicle. I'm like, what kind of vehicle would I be? And I remember when we lived in California for 4 years, we had these cool bikes with like the big giant, what do you call that?
Oh, the handlebars.
The beach cruisers. Like the wide
the beach
one.
cruiser.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were so fun. And we still have them here. But in Switzerland, it's so hilly that you can't really use them too much because they're definitely not
beach
fast.
Cruisers.
Yeah,
beach cruisers rock. They are the best. They're just kind of laid back.
I would want to be a beach cruiser if I was.
That's awesome. Yeah. I love it. That's so good.
What about you?
That is so good. Oh my gosh. For me, if I were to be a vehicle, it would probably be a Bronco. So Ford makes this. It's called the Bronco. It's kind of like an early version of the SUV back in like the 60s and 70s. What I love about it, and they're making a resurgence now. Ford is bringing them back out from a nostalgic standpoint. But what I love about them is they had really, really big engines, like Ford V8 325 engines that made them fast and strong, but they were also very utilitarian. Like you could use them for a lot of different things, So I think for me, as I think about that, I'm like, all right, I want to know that I got the power under the hood to go fast when I have to and stay in it. But I also want to know that I can do a lot of different things along the way. So I think I'd be a Bronco.
Cool. I'll have to look them up. I have no idea what.
Check it out.
I'm not into cars, so don't know.
Well, that's why you went to the beach cruiser on 2 wheels. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Let's go back then to, what happened basically, like how did this transition happen after 25 years in this industry? Tell us about Dark Night of the Soul.
Well, that was, Sarah. So for your listeners, I spent 25 years in motorsports, and it was in January of 2017 when I finally said, okay, it's time for me to pivot and shift out of here into my next chapter. I just knew that there was a reason why I had spent that time in this world of working with high performance, high pressure, high speed people. I had the opportunity to work with championship level teams and drivers and really understand like how they work. I had spent a lot of my time working on reputation and building brands, and more importantly, reputation management, which was always seen as like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? It was always after the fact. And Sarah, I had always been wondering why aren't we being more proactive when you think about the power of reputation, and when a crisis hits, it's rarely seen as an opportunity, when it could be. Instead, we see the business implications of how it, slows business down. We lose business, we lose referrals, employee leave, retention goes out the window. It's a lot of issues that go along with it. So I had this thought of, what if we shifted that mindset? Instead of it being reactive, what if it becomes proactive and intentional? So all that to say, I made the pivot out in February of 2018 to start my new life and practice as a keynote speaker, coach, and consultant to organizations that really wanted to, unpack and find speed, and that speed being in mindset, reputation, brand, right? These areas of business that matter to us every day, and especially as entrepreneurs. But to take you back, you mentioned that Dark Night of the Soul. The seed for what I'm doing today, Sarah, was planted in me July 8th, 2006. And that was a night when I literally found myself on my knees in my bedroom this one evening. I had previously, I was running the marketing communications for Nextel, which was the series sponsor in NASCAR. So there was the Nextel Cup Series. This was one of the largest sponsorships in sports history, $750 million program that I was responsible for a big part of that. And we had merged, Nextel was merging with Sprint. And in mergers, typically, people are no longer, I'm using air quotes, needed, right? And I was told that my position was being eliminated. And in my world at the time, Sarah, I valued and judged my worth based on the commas in my, paycheck, the title on my business card, how much sway I had in the office or in the garage or things like that. And suddenly it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly all of that was gone. And on July 8th, I found myself, on my knees, just looking up, just saying, Creator, look, this is just too much for me. I don't know what I'm going to do. My wife and I were 3 young children. I didn't know what the next step was going to be. And while I was there on my knees, I just said, look, just tell me what you want me to do. Just tell me, and I'll do it. I just don't know what it is. And at that moment, Sarah, this one voice, one word hit me like in the center of my chest. So I knew it wasn't my monkey mind messing with me. It wasn't up in my head, but it was in the center of my chest. And it was one word: speak. And I said, okay, great, thanks. But about what? what do I do with that now? And there was nothing else. So, I was grateful for that. I went to bed. Next morning, I get up, I get a phone call from a buddy of mine I had lunch with the day before. And he said, Mike, I don't know why it didn't come to me when we had lunch yesterday, but last night when I was getting ready for bed, it hit me that we need a speaker for our organization next month. Would you come speak? And it wasn't like he said, hey, can you come give a talk? It wasn't, hey, would you, give a presentation? It was literally those words. We need a speaker. Will you speak?
Right.
And at that point I said, well, I can't say no because I asked for this. I kind of chuckled and looked up. And at that moment though, I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? What should I speak about? And he said, whatever you want to do. Well, at that point, Facebook was like 6 months old. Social media, as we know it today, was not what it was then. It was forums and message boards. But I recognized that reputations were having to be managed differently because of the fact that brands were having to now listen to consumers. There was this new interesting dialogue going on between consumers. It wasn't just brand talking at consumer, which had been the traditional way. So I started talking about the power of technology and how that was changing the landscape of reputation management. And that led me to writing a book called Reputation Shift, which was really taking my experiences in professional motorsports of how to build and strengthen and harness the power of one of our greatest assets, which is our reputation, and use that as my centerpiece in 2018 to pivot out of the sport and start my new life, my new practice.
Yeah. So the dark night of the soul is always like, when you look back, you're like, oh yeah, makes sense, connecting the dots. But while you're in it, it's just like, you don't see it. You're just like, give me an answer, give me something.
Something, throw me a lifeline, and that's the interesting thing, Sarah. So if you think about it, from 2006 until 2017, I was still in the sport.
Yeah.
I was still doing the work. There's a quote that I love, and it goes like this: Noah didn't build the ark in the rain.
Right. Yeah.
And it's this idea of doing the work before you need it or before it's needed. More importantly, it's like getting up every day. And I can remember my wife, I'd be working on presentations. I'd be working on like curriculum. All these things are on reputation. She's like, babe, you're doing all this work. You're putting these presentations on. What are you doing it for? And I'm like, honey, I have no idea. I just know I need to be doing this. And it's amazing that over that time, I was able to build up a body of work that not only helped me write the book, but more importantly, even today, I say, gosh, I wish I had something that would outline, and I'll go back into my files. I'm like, oh my gosh, here it is. This was from 2009. I already did the work. This is great. So, there's this power, especially for entrepreneurs. Sometimes we think that when we start out, we're starting from scratch. But I really believe that everything that we've done has just been setups for us. They've been, if we look at it through that lens, they've really helped put the right tools and perspective and the work in play that we can then use as a springboard.
Right. So in a way, your own kind of start was slow, if you will, right? It was slowly building. Yeah. And yet, so when in the book you wrote, were you still mostly speaking about speed, Or was there already also kind of the other side, the benefits of taking it slow, or did that come after, maybe post-COVID?
It actually came after, to be honest with you, because like yourself, when you're out there as an entrepreneur, solopreneur, it is about speed. It's speed the market. It's listening to what the customers or what the market's telling you, and then your ability to translate that into a product or a service or an offering that you can then quickly get back to market. And it was during COVID, as a lot of people have heard it as the great pause, that gave me the opportunity to really start working on my business and not in the business, which, as a business owner, there's a huge difference between working on it and working in it. In it is that hamster wheel of speed, of go, 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 go. But when you get to work on it like you did, I love that visual of like walking through mud. I mean, that is like a great visual of nature forcing us to slow down, because we wouldn't do it ordinarily. We're just, as an entrepreneur, I don't think naturally wired to want to slow down, So this time was really important for me. And that's when, this idea of, wow, we can actually get more, do more, be more, importantly, be more when we do take the time to slow down.
Yeah. In gentle marketing, we talk a lot about this idea of taking it slower, where that also applies to kind of, going back to the building the foundation. So the 7 P's of gentle marketing, they're all about building the foundation. Oftentimes, like you say, we go directly into the hamster wheel and we want to do more in order to have more. And we forget the being more. And so the gentle marketing is really about building out the being so that you then can, build on the other things. So how do you apply that to branding, slow branding?
So I think from a branding standpoint, the slowing down to me, when I think of that, I think of the word intentionality and authenticity. Because when we look at branding today, and it's funny, I had this conversation with the CEO last week talking about, he was very similar. He's like, oh, we got this new digital campaign coming out. We got this new, video program coming, all these things. And it was all this like sizzle, and I said, so tell me, what are you doing internally to make sure you can back all this up? I mean, can you back all this up? And he kind of looked at me like, well, we're putting it all out there. And it was interesting because the light bulb went off, and I said to him, so much of branding today is focused on the digital side of things, of what people see. And that's important. Don't get me wrong. We have to make sure that people are seeing what we do, what we offer. I like to focus more on what I call the analog. It's the people, the person, the substance behind it. So when you talk about slowing down, when I talk to leaders or other entrepreneurs, I really try to help them focus in on the values that they espouse, and then how are those values being lived out amongst their teams or within the organization. Sarah, Gallup polls, they did a survey a couple of years ago on the values in the workplace. And look, how much money is spent, especially in branding and things, and companies putting their values out there. These are the things we value. What do you think percentage-wise? What percentage of employees do you think actually believe in the values of the organizations for which they work? What do you think if you put a percentage on that?
Yeah, probably a very low percentage. It seems like it's just a facade. It's like something that's like, often companies, they use values in order to sell more. That's the problem with that kind of approach, right? Where it's not coming from the inside. It's something that you put out as a facade, and it looks good.
That's right. So it's really, you're spot on. The percentage was 24%.
Right.
So less than a quarter of the employees and organizations actually believe in the values. And that could be for a variety of reasons. It could be by what they see, the leaders actually doing. There's a difference between what they see on the wall and what they actually see being lived out. It could be also, they don't know how. There's a strategy that I walk leaders through, and maybe this would be helpful for your audience, is, take the time to be intentional with your team and look at those values and sit down and say, so where does okay, if we talk about honesty, where does honesty come to life in your job today? Where can you bring it to life? And really be intentional and think about it, because oftentimes we just think, well, you believe it and you live it. It's not true, because people typically will hop on the hamster wheel and get to work, and they're just focused on getting the job done. But are you getting it done in the way that is actually building your brand to the level that you want it to be? So when you talk about slowing down, I really believe that being intentional with our efforts, intentional with the words, intentional with our people is paramount. And then making sure that authenticity is coming through, which comes from our values.
Right. Yeah. Even though
it's inside out.
Sorry. Yeah. Authenticity, it's often also misunderstood, right? It's like this term that almost became a buzzword. And so it's like, well, can you buy a course on how to be authentic? It's really going deep and slowing down and going deep. And that's the work you do with those teams.
It is. And you can get there, but it takes people being willing to be here. Here's another crazy word. Okay. That people are like, whoa, wait a minute. What are you talking about? You've got to be vulnerable. You've got to be willing. If you want to be authentic, you've got to be willing to be vulnerable. And oftentimes people will attach and associate vulnerability with weakness. And I think and believe, and I know you do as well, Sarah, because in our group that we have in our Elevation Collective, we talk about that there's actually great strength in being vulnerable. The ability as a leader to open yourself up and to say, you know what, maybe I don't have the answer, or we did make this mistake, or maybe there is an area that I can grow. Being confident to say those things or show up in that way, to be, right? Getting back to the word be, not do, is amazingly powerful. And as a leader, when your team sees that you're willing to show up in an authentic way, and at times you can be vulnerable. Now, I'm not saying you come in every day and are like, oh, the world's on fire, I don't know what's going on. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about being willing to show up real and as who you are. But that takes time to get comfortable in your skin, right?
I was going to say, I imagine that, even like, especially in that industry that you were in, where it's so much focused on kind of like looking good and, the hustle and that must be like quite the challenge to get these leaders to, show up with vulnerability, right?
Well, the leaders, the athletes themselves, right? Because this was a world of this machismo, where it was all about competition. It's all about I'm bigger, badder, faster than you, right? And I found myself for many years, and it was really actually liberating, Sarah, because I didn't realize how much weight I was carrying with me, with all the armor I would put on every day to try to protect my authentic self.
Right.
Because I had to show up. I worked in an environment where you did have to be tough. You show up with vulnerability because that was seen as weakness. So, that's another part of the challenge is getting people to realize how much they're carrying this armor that we put on every morning before we go to the office or these days when we hop on Zoom, right? And how liberating it is to actually take that off and put it off to the side and say, here I am. But in that moment, there was this opportunity in the choice you make to actually bring your magnificence out, to bring what I like to call your DNA, right? And I'm not talking about your X and Y chromosomes. I'm talking about your divine natural abilities, the things that, Sarah, that you do and only you do that no one else can do. It's like breathing for you, like the way you have these beautiful conversations, the way that you approach gentle marketing in a way that's almost like counterintuitive, right? But you do it in such a way that it flows and it's natural. We all have those things. We all have those things. So that's that's a sort of like slowing down, right? To unpack these things and become more aware, because as an entrepreneur, those are our competitive advantages. Now, people are probably saying, oh, you talk about the spiritual stuff of divine natural abilities. How does it relate to my business? That is your business, because you are your business. You are that brand. You're going to bring this out to the market, and people are going to be attracted to that because you're authentically you, not like everybody else selling the same things.
Wow.
Sorry, you get me all fired up on that.
No, I love it. And I think, like, just listening to you, it just strikes me how much that whole branding, personal branding talk has changed in like quite a short amount of time. Not a linear amount of time, like a short amount of time. Like, I think even 3 years ago, nobody was talking about, those kind of things. It was still like, branding is how you show up, and there's a certain expectation how you need to show up. So I'm with you. It's like taking off the armor. For me, it's taking off the masks. And I think people more than ever are ready for that, right? We're just kind of like tired of having to be someone that we're not.
Yeah. And quite honestly, too, I think that there are two sides to this, Sarah. You bring up a really, really cool point, is that there's the personal desire, and then there's the business allowance, we'll call it, right? So if you think about it, traditionally, the brand was the organization. And we talk about showing up, you want to represent the brand well, right? What we've seen happen now is that the brand is actually, yes, there is a brand. And I look at this from the standpoint of reputation, right? People often think, oh, well, the company builds the reputation. No. The reputation of the organization is built upon the shoulders of every single person who shows up every single day and represents that brand. And the words they say, the actions that they put out into the world, right? So there's now this recognition by the organizations that, wow, you know what? We've got amazingly talented people who can bring things to life that are going to actually help our brand. So we're going to give them the space on places like LinkedIn or YouTube or these other social channels and platforms, Clubhouse as an example, to go out there, and build that brand, which is then ultimately building the organization's brand as well. So there's this both sides of like people being willing and the company saying it's okay. Because I know early on in my career, when I started this is going back 7-8 years ago, when I was asked to speak more on reputation or speak about mindset, the companies that I worked for didn't like that. They didn't like that because they thought that was diminishing and taking away from the brand. Whereas today, it's a complete 180 where now, Brent, yes, go out there and speak. Yes, go out there and represent, because you're representing us too. So it's a great time, but it gets back to also this idea of slowing down and like, what are you doing? How are you showing up? What are you putting out to people?
Yeah. And it also, like, back to that conversation of only 25% of people believing in the company's values. Well, there's such a huge opportunity to rediscuss these values and then really create a win-win situation where, the employees become the ambassadors of the company. That's exactly it. And you're right. Like 5-10 years ago, when I would train in companies about using LinkedIn, the CEO would always be scared. He's like, I don't understand why are you saying things that then make everybody leave? I'm like, but you could look at it as a, branding aspect, like, win-win. They didn't get it. And now slowly, yes, they're starting to see that there is also benefit to them. From the awareness.
There is. Yeah. Well, it is. And you've got to be willing to put yourself out there and to be doing it, not for the immediate reaction or gratification. I've just found, and I'm sure you did, because I'm curious about your pivot, because you went from, being the LinkedIn lady and focus there to now in the gentle marketing space. I went from motorsports, to where I had all my relational equity and knew the job inside and out to start my own practice. And there's that place in there where it's scary, right? Because you're really having to rebrand yourself in a way. Did you experience that?
Yeah, totally. Totally. You basically dive into the unknown. It's like, is this gonna work? And even there's this transition phase where you're still kind of, even now, I still do LinkedIn work. So you kind of have a foot in each in each life, so to speak. But even that, it's all okay. It's all, human. We're humans. We can't just, like robots, shut down on one side and then, be another robot in another life. So accepting that transition phase as well, and accepting that it's scary. Totally.
Yeah. Well, that's the other word that I've really leaned into over these last, several years since I've been out doing this work is surrender. Right. So here's another one. I go from like vulnerability to now surrender, and people are like, what are you talking about? Surrender. No, but there is again, I believe that there's power in surrendering to certain things that are going on. Because I really believe, especially in those pivots, Sarah, where, we as creators and we see a vision of something. So now we want to control the path, right? We want to control the way that it's going to come to life because we have a vision. We are planners, and there's this realization. I don't know about you, but when I've always thought of it this way, that the more I tried to control things, the more of a mess they became. It's sort of like trying right? I mean, I think of like being at the beach and I'm trying to like scoop more sand into my hand. And like the more I scoop in, the more it's just spilling over the sides, this falling through my fingers, instead of this surrendering to saying, okay, I have done absolutely everything that I can do today to get me one step closer. At this point, I can't control anything else that's happening around here. I can only control three things, and that's my attitude, my decisions, and my behavior. Outside of that, I've got to surrender to what's happening and then also pivot and react. It doesn't mean surrender and be passive. It means like surrender that things aren't going to be in your control and then pivot and react in a way that's going to be appropriate.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you just sit back and don't do anything, but it also doesn't mean that you keep trying to do more in order to get to that other point.
Right. Again, you keep saying that, and I love it. We keep going back to the do more and instead of be more.
Yeah.
How can I be? How can I be? I love that. Yeah. I love that. Especially for entrepreneurs and people that wake up every day knowing that, they are going to eat what they kill every day. And you got to get out there and keep working. So this idea, I really would encourage your audience to think about those words of how do I embrace vulnerability? How do I look at surrender in ways that are actually beneficial to me being, not detrimental to my doing?
So so powerful. We
that down.
Sidetracked into very deep territories. That's what we do. That's how we roll, right, Mike?
Yeah, I love it. And that's the beauty of conversation, right? I mean, you just kind of go to where it's going. But
exactly, we were meant to go there. Right. I want to come back to one point that we often hear about branding, and that's that know, like, and trust factor.
Yeah.
How would you kind of define that, or what's your take on it?
So I love that. So I'm going to go back to the racing metaphor. So I'm going to say that, the whole know, trust, like is sort of like first, second, third gear. Okay. We'll call it like first, second gear. Okay. It's getting you going and you need that. That's great. I like to focus on the next couple of gears that are going to really, really, really optimize speed and get you going as like a person or a business. And that's in the space of feel, think, do. Okay. So feel, think, do. To me, that's where it takes us to an emotional place of the emotions that we're creating for the people that are around us, our customers, our colleagues, the employees, our key stakeholders, our family, friends, community, right? This is holistic. We aren't just entrepreneur by day and someone else by night, right? This is sort of like surround sound for us. But if we think about, the start with the, oh gosh, the no trust and
trust.
like, yeah, no, like, trust. Great. Perfect. But how do we make people feel?
Mm.
And then how does that translate to how they think about us? And ultimately that leads to what they want to do with us. So I use the example of emotional souvenirs. Okay. So Sarah, let's try this out. If you were to tell me, if I were to ask you right now to pull out the ticket stubs from your first concert, or better yet, the t-shirt, do you have the t-shirt like with you from your first concert?
I don't think I have the t-shirt, but I definitely have the memory. Yeah.
Right. That's the point. Like we will outgrow the t-shirt. We'll lose it in the move. The poster will rip. The cup will get lost. The tickets, maybe they're tucked away somewhere in a memory book. Right. But if I asked you to close your eyes and think about who you were there with, what was like the opening songs? How did you feel? What were the smells like? I know, like in a heartbeat, right? They'd come right back. And you said that. You said you have the memories.
Right.
So this idea for us as business owners and leaders is like, how do we create these emotional souvenirs that go beyond the transaction of the day to day? Because if we think about it, look, the people are selling things like we are products that we're selling. But how do we transcend to the relational, emotional side of things that regardless that other person calling for your business, your competitor calling, that you've created such an emotional connection with your customers, with your employees, that they don't want to leave.
Right.
They don't want to leave. And that's where it gets back to the feel, think, do kind of model.
I love that. It's so interesting because just about 2 episodes ago, I had a guest on that was talking about public speaking. And I told her, I'm very picky about guests who want to come on the show to talk about public speaking, because as an introvert, that's like my number one fear to, speak on stage. And she's like, no, but, this is different. Believe me, I actually work specifically with introverts. And she said exactly what you just said. Think about how you make people feel. So it was not, previously I always heard, just only think about your message. Don't think about who you are and how you're going to look like. I'm like, yeah, that's nice. Yes, I do want to get the message across, but I'm still going to be nervous. And so she's like, well, shift the focus away from you and to your audience and think about how you make them feel. And so that really resonated. And it's the same here, just with everything you do in your business. If you shift that focus away from you to them, that is, that's how you're going to remembered. And that's how you're different, right?
That's exactly right. And I love how you keep using the word shift. See, I'm getting to you. Sarah. I love it. We're gonna make you a racer yet. But it's true.
On my beach cruiser, though.
On your beach cruiser, girl. That's absolutely right. I love it. So that really is the idea of shifting, and that little bit of a mind. I call it mind shift, and that's really what we're trying to do with organizations and leaders as they're looking at their business and these connections they're making, the way that they're showing up with their brands, how they're authentically creating speed in the areas of mindset, reputation, and brand. That's where I like to work, again, on that analog side of really bringing the most, helping them optimize, because we've all got it in us. It just takes people like your coach just to kind of like, well, Sarah, what have you thought about it this way? That doesn't mean that you don't have to rehearse and practice and get the message down. But when you do that, it frees you up to think about the impact of the message you're delivering to them, which is a gift,
Yeah. And you're right. It usually starts in your head, and that's where you do that little shift.
I believe 100%. I've learned that from the best drivers, in the world, that they know where, when, and how to shift not only their vehicles in the race when times are tough, but also their mindsets in order to stay competitive and stay in that race. It's just as much what's happening up here as much as what we're putting out around us in our actions.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, gosh, this has been really, really good. Thanks so much.
It's been fun. Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. I hope your audience is able to pick a couple of nuggets out of here that'll help them, during the day.
Do you have any last thoughts? So for like the entrepreneur who's listening, if they're kind of worried about this idea of building a brand, what would you tell them? How would you tell them to slow it down, surrender? Where would you, have them go?
Yeah, well, gosh, there were a lot of things that I would tell them, but here's an important one, especially as a solopreneur, entrepreneur, somebody who is building their business. One of the most vital jobs on the race team, and it's not the driver, it's not the pit crew, it's not the crew chief, what people typically think. One of the most vital roles is a person called the spotter. And the spotter is this person who stands high atop the racetrack property, has binoculars, so can see the entire racetrack, and has radio communication to the driver. So that as the driver is solely focused on his or her goal of like moving up or blocking, whatever it might be, or if there's an accident happening around them, it's that spotter that tells them what's happening in their blind spots. And we all have blind spots, Sarah. We all do, right? So as you're thinking about brand, and if you're building your brand, it's important that, yes, you're showing up with authenticity and your values are being lived out, you're building your reputations. But if you don't have somebody speaking truth into you and helping you see what's happening in your blind spots, you're going to end up in the wreck, up in the wall, and out of the race. So I'd encourage your listeners to find a spotter, find somebody who they trust. Find someone who they can say, look, I need you to tell me what I need to hear, not what I want to hear, so I can stay competitive and stay in the race, and have that level of trust that that their intention there is to serve you and help you. So I would encourage people to think about that analogy and find that spotter in their life.
I love that. Yeah. I'm also warming up to those to those terms and analogy. And I remember watching this race car movie with my kids. I have 2 boys, so I think I'll have to rewatch it with different eyes. Now I'll know all the terms.
There you go. No, there you go. It's simple. It's funny. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm not a race fan. That's why I'm not going to understand." But when I start to unpack, the stories and the analogies and how they relate to business, right? And speed, competition, every week you're evaluated on your performance, right? Having to find competitive advantages, research and development, all these things. People are like, oh my gosh, exactly. Exactly. There's a lot we can learn.
Yeah. And you'll adopt more and more slow kind of terms and words and kind of build those into it.
100%, because that's exactly it. When here's something seriously, when you're talking about 0.3 of a second separating first from fourth, right? And I mean, that's like that.
Yeah.
And you're trying to find 0.3 of a second over a 1.5 mile racetrack. The teams actually break the racetrack up into 8 sections to see where are they performing best and not so well, to figure out where can we pick up the little bit, 1/10 of a second here, 1/10 of a second there, to make up that ground. So that speaks to the idea of slowing down, of not just trying to drive as fast as you can. It's like, we're going to make this racetrack a problem down, which is what leaders can do for their business process, their sales cycle, their employee onboarding, whatever that might be. So yes, slow is just as important as fast, if not more important, quite honestly. So thank you for slowing me down this morning.
Love it. Thanks so much. Please do tell people where they can find you, find out about your book. And then I'll have one last question, so don't leave before that.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for that, Sarah. This has been great. So you can find me very, very simply. You'll like the branding here. You can go to my website, MikeMooney.com. That's Mooney, MikeMooney.com. You can get my book there as well. You can find my book on Amazon. It's also on Audible and iTunes. And I'd love to connect with people on LinkedIn as well. You can find me on LinkedIn and other social media with Mike Mooney. So Let's connect. Yeah, I'd love it.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. So the final question that I always ask my guests is, what are you grateful for today or this week, Mike?
So honestly, I'm grateful for people like you, Sarah, to be honest. I don't say that. I mean, it sounds very gratuitous, right? Well, thank you for being here. No, what I mean by that is I'm grateful for people like yourself who have a vision to bring something to life, gentle marketing as an example, right? You have the vision, and yet you also have the courage to bring that to life and work at it every single day. And why I'm grateful for that is because that inspires me. And I need inspiration every single day. Being out here doing the work that I do, much like yourself or others in your audience, we need inspiration every day. So thank you. I'm grateful that you're doing this and you've got this podcast and you're continuing to evolve it and share it, because that inspires me. And I'm sure like everybody who's listening in your audience. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you being here and having this wonderful and deep conversation. Thank you.
And anytime, my friend, anytime. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as Mike and I enjoyed recording it. You'll find the show notes of this show with further links at saracenoCroce.com/GBR85. Please also check out Mike's website at mikemooney.com. That's Mike, MOONEY.com. And look for Mike's book, Reputation Shift, on Amazon. If this is your first episode with us here at the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, big warm welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of this episode. I'm building the conversations of this podcast around the 7 Ps of the Gentle Marketing Mandala, and you can download your one-page marketing plan with this version of the 7 Ps of marketing at saracenoCroce.com/one-page, the number 1 and then page. And it comes with 7 email prompts to really help you reflect on these different Ps, and I think it'll help you understand kind of the logic behind how this podcast is set up. Next week, I'm talking to Cecilia Wessinger about ecosystem building, and I'm really looking forward to that conversation. In the meantime, let's be the change we want to see in the world. Speak soon.